Okay. Yeah, so what are we going to do today? So I've been out for a while, as you probably noticed. So I want to look into Deno lang, which is basically, as you've probably heard, the new node, so to speak. And it's built on a Rust. It still uses the V8 as basically what, well, as the form of implementation of JavaScript. And we're going to create a very simple web server just to figure out how that works. So as you can see, let me switch over here to coding view. Okay, so on the left, you basically see my IDE. On the right is a Insomnia to test API endpoints that we're going to generate. And let's just have a look at how different, where is it here? How different something like that could look like, right? So the first thing that's interesting to know with Deno is that you can write TypeScript natively. There's no config, there's no compiler, there's no bundler, nothing. Like we're just going to build this as if we were to write browser modules, which is pretty cool. Pretty cool. Let's maybe start with importing something. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have prepared a little, wherever that is. Actually, sorry, let me find it. Let me find it. Okay. There it is. Okay. Got you. Okay. So that's a little GitHub repo I prepared. I will later put it under the video probably. Now, what this is doing is basically preparing a couple of things that we want to use to kind of like imagine how let's call it start simple server. Is that how it's written? Probably. Oops. Right, how simplified this could be compared to something like I don't know what, let's say Express or whatever else you use, right? So let's just say start simple server, and the only thing I'm going to place in here is an array of routes, right? So I say path, what do we call this over here? Test. Sure, let's do that. It's path test, and method. Actually, let's be type safe here. Okay, methods get, and it's obviously not called methods, it's called method. Okay, and then we have our handler, and right now the only thing we're going to do is to basically say, hey, let's return test me. Okay, so that's basically everything I need in order to create it. So let's see if that's working. So I'm going to do Deno run. Now I do with allow net, and then the index ts, right? So this is running now. So what we should be able to see, if we kind of like go over here, so we're sending now our test, and we get this over, and oops, seems to be an issue somewhere. Where's that? There's no export member named method. Let's quickly see if that's really true. Okay, let's ignore that for now, I guess. It's not updated yet. And let's have a look at it like now. Okay, oops. All right, let's try it again. Then we have a not found. Why am I here now? Ugh, where is it? Here. Okay, /test, and it says not found. Okay. Why not? So the method isn't accepted. That's the problem, right? I need to get this method. Okay. So what I guess the issue is that I either haven't, let's try this out. Check this in the repo. I might have not pushed this. It's now a little bit inconvenient from the, let's see, is that part of method? Oh yeah, that's an enum type. That should work fine. That should work fine. Okay, so let's quickly run my clear cache script. See if it now works. Let's find out. It's re-downloading everything. Okay, let's try. Still says not found. Okay, path test method. Is that not the right way of writing it? I'm obviously very well prepared here. No handler, and the handler returns. This actually all looks fine. Let's see if it's this. Oh, shooting a post. Sorry about that. Okay. Yeah, that can happen, I guess. Okay. So this should have not been as complicated as it turned out to be. So what's the idea here? As you can see, I define a router, have a particular method, and then have a particular handler. And right now I'm simply returning this. Of course, this can be asynchronous, how it returns, but it's relatively simple to work on this. So let's maybe see what else we could kind of do with this. Let's create a second route and say, okay, how would this actually look like? We probably would call this something like /API/register, right? And with now the method would be post, and our handler here would probably be a little bit different. So let's make this asynchronous and put in here a client, which we have not imported. So that's the client request, and I cannot type today. Super hot in the room. Okay, client request. Okay. Use the TypeScript here. Okay, now let's see. So the first thing that I kind of want to do is to maybe log how this client looks like, just so we have an overview of that, and then maybe return test. Right? Okay. So far, so good. So let's rerun this. Now, one of the things I can do is I can add this flag, watch, and then I don't have to rerun it. So that's basically the equivalent of what you probably use nodemon for. And if I do that, then whenever I make a file change, it's actually going to directly reload and rebuild. So, okay, so far so good. So let's go over to post and we said API register. So let's quickly do this here. Let's see what we get. We get our test back. But more importantly, what you see here is this is what we receive, right? So we've got an URL, we've got the method, we've got, well, there are no params right now. And then we have our body, the authentication. And that's basically everything we kind of like get from there. So what is a param, right? This is something that you of course know from things like Express, let's say, right? So let's maybe do that and say actually what we want to return something else. We want to say name is client params name. Right, and what we expect to happen now is, of course, if we just added a slash here and said, I don't know, Sam, and fired it, we would get in our result our name, Sam, back. So that's pretty easy and straightforward. What else can we do here? So we could read a couple of different kind of parameters, but that's really not that interesting. What we want to do now is, okay, fair enough. So there seems to be an authentication involved that would kind of help us to make things easier. How would that work? How can I work with a database? And in order to do that, let's simply import one. Now what we need is database. I'm going to choose SQLite 3 connector. Is all I need from, and again, I'm just doing this directly, and this is how most of those third-party tools look like, right? So it's HTTPS, then deno.lang x, and then the package. In our case, it's going to be DenoDB. And whenever you see that mod.ts, this is normally kind of like an index file that kind of loads everything the package offers. And then let's create this database connection. So connection, this is a new SQLite connector, and do this pretty locally here. Say that's our database SQLite. Okay, that's basically it. And then we could say const b is new database, and we're going to drop in the connection. Actually, let's call this connector. It's more appropriate. Okay. Okay, so far so good. So this should work in theory. What we still need is a user model. So what we're going to do is, and this is something I already prepared, we're going to use a very simple, that's actually what it's called, right? Simple user. And this just has an email and a password field. Just basically the way you would kind of like work with models. We're going to go into that in a second. So the simple user is something that kind of like makes things for us possible. So what I'm going to do is to basically say, hey, let's link several models here. In our case, simple user. And just so this database actually starts to work, let's say sync. And for now, let's do drop true, right? Which basically say, okay, this is actually more important, to be honest with you, for if you have like different connectors. Like this should be fine for SQLite. It doesn't really matter that much. Okay, so far so good. Now, when we register now, what the idea is to basically say, okay, let's create now. So we have email and password. You can see I already prepared that. So what I'm going to do is to basically say, okay, simple user create, and I'm going to drop in client body, right? I'm not going to even bother with the try catch block, and then simply say request accepted. Okay. Now let's try this out. So if I were now to go to register, let's get rid of the SAM here and click send. Okay. Then I guess we have a problem here. HTTPS deno.lang. Really? Did I not write this correctly? What's this, an internet issue? Try it out. No, this does not seem to be the right. So deno-lang /x deno-db /mod/ts. This is I thought that is correct. Let's see. Was deno-lang down? Oh. Stupid. Okay, sorry about that. You can tell it's not my day. Okay, so it's Deno land. Give me 1 second. Let's take this. All right, so sorry. But you know how it is when a wife calls, you better answer. Okay, so let's see what the problem now was. Okay, requires access to, okay. That's actually an interesting point. So let's close this. So let's look at what we're running here, and let's have a little bit of a look at what we're saying here. So we say allow net, we say watch, but what we want to do is to basically, in this case, say, okay, allow read and allow write, right? So that's the full command you want to run if you include a database, because you need to have permissions to the file system, otherwise you have a problem. Okay, let's run this now and give it another shot. Yep, and you can see now the request is accepted. Now, so far so good. Let's quickly see now if we can log in. So let's do two more things. So the first thing I'm going to do is to create a restricted path, right? Let's call this API restricted. And it has a method get, and it has a handler. How's that going to look like? That's a good question. Let me get this from the authorization, huh? Does this make sense? Let me quickly look that up. So how can I restrict it? Here I set it. Oh, there's something like authenticated. There's something like authenticated. Okay, well, then let's kind of build it. So the first thing that I kind of want to see is return, and then I say client, which I don't have here. Let's get that in. Client authenticated. Quickly see. If that kind of exists here. Authenticated. I hate that word. Okay, so restrict it. Right. You get auth is null. Okay. Okay. And what is this done? Oh, seems to fail. Oh, that's probably private. Okay. Well, I would say let's build a quick middleware, right? Let's create a function requires auth, takes in the client, and what we basically will do is to say, okay, if not client authenticated, then we're going to throw a new route exception. For one and a message, and we need to import that. Okay. Not authenticated. Okay, let's try that. And that's all this needs to do, right? Does this need to call next or anything? No. Okay. Then here, let's say use, and say requires auth. Okay. So let's simply try this again. So here, we shouldn't get that far, right? That's the question now. Do we even get here or not? So if I now click send, no, just rebuild. Oh, do you mean authenticated? Yes, that's probably what I mean. Okay. Yep. Okay. Literally what I mean. Oh. It's an object or null. Yeah, I thought it's null. If not, client authenticated. No, I didn't write that anywhere. This is old. This is old. Yeah, just didn't build fast enough. Okay. Yeah. So now you can see that there's a 4.1 unauthorized, and it says not authenticated because that's what I build now as a prerequisite, right? So that's going to be what we're going to look into how that works. So okay, so we have a register. So now we need some kind of login. So let's just copy this, right, and see how fast prototyping would work. So that would be our login. It's also method post, and here we're going to say login. And of course, this works a little bit different, right? So a simple user login. I'm just gonna put that over here. It's probably all I need. Now that I think of it, let's simplify this down to simple user login. It's going to pass that right in, and we should be good. Let's try it out. Right, so let's go to login and say, okay, send. Oh, this time it's not a get, it's a post. And it says unauthorized. Okay, so that is clear because we flushed the register again. So let's register first. Send. Okay. And then now we're going to go and send the same stuff over to login. And as you can see, I get a JSON web token. I'm going to copy this for now. Now I'm going to go into, what do we call it? Restricted. Send that over here. And that's now a get. And it says not authenticated. And then I'm going to go into the bearer, put the right kind of token in, and send it again. And as you can see, I get my, in that case, authenticated out, right? So I can basically see whatever I stored here. Awesome. So that's how prototyping could look like. Now let's compare this on a higher level, right? So how would that have looked like in, for example, Express or in Laravel or whatever, or in Ruby on Rails? So we basically, I mean, and now we put everything on one file, of course, right? So, but basically, okay, so we have a particular file connector going to generate the database, and then drop in a model. So this is, by the way, is something that you have to look into how that works. That's a particular ORM system, and that's how you basically supply models, and this looks like you would expect something like that to look like, right? So let's going to create so we create that and say I don't know what we could call this, right? Let's say post extends model, right? And you kind of can, yeah, you know how something like that would look like. So probably it has static fields. So it would look like, and then it has an ID and, you know, stuff like that, right? And that's more or less how we would go about this, and then create your models accordingly. Or you can, of course, like write your model, and that's actually the cool thing about Deno, right? So you write your models and then you kind of reuse them. So for example, simple user, like, you know, eventually when you work, you will notice that how a user model looks like for a particular form of authentication, right? So for example, let's say it has a username, it has this and that, or what, however you tend to work. Like, you're gonna have like 2 or 3 different versions of that, maybe, that you normally over the course of your coding life gonna code over and over and over again. So of course then there's the possibility to say like, okay, that's an npm package, or it's a repository I'm going to pull in, those kind of things. But here, more importantly, is it's very easy to say, okay, I'm just going to pull in, as you know, from whatever source. I mean, you can see that this is just a, you know, wherever it is on GitHub. Pull in the stuff that I maintain completely separately and individually, and can therefore kind of like work with a tool belt that either I or others or in unison have built, in order to kind of like patchwork together my application, right? Just kind of like, okay, so this whole authentication thing is kind of like, yes, so one of the opinionated things that you will come to is to say, well, if I build an API, it's very likely that there are certain things that I need. I will probably encrypt passwords, so there's some kind of bcrypt implementation I need. I will probably have some kind of authentication, like, okay, what is it going to be? It's going to be a session or a token, right? There are not too many options there. And it just makes it very easy to kind of like reuse it. Now, on the other hand, familiarity with that is of course out of your realm, right? So I mean, looking into this is not as easy, right? So you really have to kind of like go to wherever that is and look at the documentation there, right? Because it's not locally, it's not somewhere in your Node modules. Which is actually not true, hence this clear command. But it's not as easy and accessible as you would think. Right. So that said, well, that's basically what we're doing. Like, should you use this in production? Probably not. Not as of now. But prototyping is, you know, like relatively fast. I think that, you know, with would have been prepared better, I probably could have generated what we've built here now within 5 minutes. Right? I mean, it's not that much code. Not even touching 50 lines of code, and we're talking about, okay, we've got authentication, we've got routes, we've got database connectivity, we've got an ORM in there, like I mean, pretty much everything you need to kind of start to build your front end. And that's the very nice part about it. So yeah, I'm very convinced that Deno is the future, at least for everything that currently is covered by Node. And I pretty much like it so far. Let me know what you think, and see you guys next time.